teach me how to pray.
While this is the story of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the home St. John the Apostle had built for her in Ephesus, Turkey, and her last years there, it is important that we understand the significance both historically and biblically of the once great city of Ephesus, the place where the Blessed Virgin spent her last 9 years on earth and from which she was assumed into heaven. We will also visit the first church built in honor of the Blessed Mother, as well as the magnificent Basilica of St. John. The ancient ruins of the city of Ephesus lie on the western coast of Turkey, 200 miles southwest of Istanbul and a short 40-minute drive down the coast from the large port city of Izmir, formerly known as Smyrna. Before turning east into the area of Ephesus, one first reaches the resort city known as Kuşadası on the Aegean Sea. Kuşadası symbolizes modern Turkish tourism, where cruise ships pull in every day. Many of the cruise ships have just passed through the Greek islands. The island of Patmos, where St. John was exiled and where he had his famous vision described in the book of Revelations, is also nearby. Kuşadası lies on land once covered by the Aegean, which was the harbor area leading into Ephesus. The ruins you are now observing are from the 1st century Roman period, when Ephesus flourished as the gateway to Asia Minor. Ephesus gave way to Roman rule after 7 centuries of alternately being ruled by Athens, Sparta, Alexander the Great, and the Egyptians, who ultimately yielded to the Romans in 133 BC. While the Ephesians managed to overthrow Roman rule for 3 brief years, they ultimately gave way to Rome again in 87 BC. The ruins, now visited by thousands each year, remind us of the Ephesus Golden Period, which began in 27 BC, when it was the second greatest city of the Roman Empire after Alexandria. It also became the permanent residence of the governor of Rome. The Ephesians were an educated group, taking great pride in their library, erected under the patronage of the Roman Emperor Agrippa and inscribed with his name. There are many handsome fountains, beautiful homes of the wealthy, even a stadium and gymnasium with sauna, and a steam from underground. There's even a cold room that's visible in the ruins. Also apparent is the famous harbor road, which ran through the city down to the harbor, and the famous temple of Artemis. For centuries, people from all over the world traveled to Ephesus to pay tribute to the pagan fertility goddess known as Artemis. Antony and Cleopatra are just 2 of the notables who visited the goddess to pay homage in her temple. The Ephesians aggressively defended their goddess Artemis against the Christian preaching of St. Paul and his disciples. This is described in the Acts of the Apostles, where Ephesians rioted in their gigantic theater in defense of Artemis and against the Christian preaching of the gospel. Here is the view of their incredible theater, where thousands rioted, and where Paul, who was preaching nearby, surely would have been killed that day had he gone to confront them as he wanted to. Fortunately, his disciples convinced him not to go. In fact, you can see off in the distance the prison where St. Paul was jailed for a period outside Ephesus.
My name is Father Joe Buttigieg. I come from the island of Malta in the Mediterranean, and I belong to the Capuchin Franciscan order. I was asked to come here 7 years ago now. To my great surprise, I was asked whether I would want to go to Turkey and help out my Italian Capuchin friars. I was in Kenya for 2 years, and for health reasons I had to leave. So I found myself here because of English, to help the English pilgrims.
Let's listen to Father Joe, our Franciscan guide in Ephesus, as he talks about the famous harbor road, the road on which John brought the Blessed Mother into Ephesus in approximately 42 AD.
This is the road from where the gospel came into Asia Minor. And from Asia Minor, let us not forget that it spread out throughout the whole world. So wherever the Christians are, and if they can say that Jesus is Lord, it's because it came from this road here. This is the same road that Paul with Aquila and Priscilla walked when they arrived to Ephesus for the first time. And again when he came back by himself and where he stayed for almost 3 years. Earlier, this is the road also that would bring the Blessed Mother.
Let's listen to Father Joe as he explains the importance of the double church of St. Mary, the 2nd century church which was erected in honor of Our Lady.
So now we are going to visit the ruins of what is called the church, either the Church of St. Mary or the Church of the Council or the Double Basilica, because as you can see on this board, it was doubled during 2 various centuries. It's called also the Church of the Council because in the year 431 we find the council, the so-called Council of Ephesus, that declared Mary as Mother of God. Or also the Church of St. Mary, because as I will show you, this is a church that was built in honor of the Blessed Mother, the Virgin Mary. This is the Church of St. Mary, but I have to underline that this is the first church ever to be built in the whole world in honor of the Blessed Mother, already in the 2nd century. And with a principle, the Christians would never build a church in honor of anyone if that someone would not have lived and died in the area. So this is the oldest part of the Church of St. Mary. This is where the council in the year 431 was held and discussed this, the dogma of the Theotokos, Mother of God. And I have to tell you something about this dogma, because in the 4th century we find a problem among 2 theological schools in the Christian world. There was Cyril from Alexandria and Nestorius from Constantinople, today's Istanbul. Cyril was suggesting a new name for the Blessed Mother, Theotokos, Mother of God. Until then, the Mother of God was called Panaya, which means all holy. Nestorius from Constantinople was opposing the use of the name Theotokos, Mother of God. In fact, he was proposing Christostokos, Mother of the Christ. He was not against the name, but against the use of the name. And I would imagine that Nestorius was against the use of the name Theotokos, not without any reason. Because remember, we are living in a part of the world where the female deity was very much adored. The ancient name of Turkey, is Anatolia. The word Ana in Turkish means mother. And Cybele in Anatolia, in central Anatolia, was already adored as mother of the gods. Then in the same Ephesus where we are staying, we find the temple of Artemis, another female goddess. And not very far away from Ephesus, we have another female temple, the goddess Aphrodisias. So, in my opinion, Nestorius was afraid that the early Christians would turn the devotion to Mary into another cult, making out of Mary a goddess. And that's why he was suggesting more Christostokos, Mother of the Christ. Nestorius, with his group, ended up to be condemned by this council. But this council would also give us something very important. Now, written, we have the first written document that says the holy theologian John, along with the Virgin Mary, who lived in Ephesus. So even logically, we can say that if this place had nothing to do with Mary, why would they come from all over the world, gather here to discuss a Christological Marian problem, such as the motherhood of Mary, if this place had nothing to do with the Blessed Mother? So these foundations are the foundations of the altar where the first Christians used to put the relics of the martyrs and the saints. It was behind the Holy of Holies. And so this would help us to understand how important this place must have been to the first Christians. I wanted also to point out to you on the wall, on some of the stones, you can see some graffiti with the name of Mary, M-R, in Greek. So another important place that forms part of this magnificent basilica, or the double church of St. Mary, that would show more and more how important this place must have been, is this baptistry. It's an octagon, in an octagon form, and that's very important because it's a nearly Christian symbol. The octagon is the symbol of the eschaton, the last days, because with baptism, the Christian believe that we have already started the last days. So this is the already and not yet. And the baptistry, of course, contains the pool. And while the Christians would only baptize on Easter Vigil once a year, while the church would vigil, the assembly would vigil with the Word of God in the main hall, that means in the church, the bishop was here to baptize the new Christians. And that's why he would be held by deacons or by diaconesses out of prudence, because mostly they were adults and they were baptized naked. So the bishop was held by deacons if they were men, and diaconesses if they were women. And naturally, the baptistry has the steps that would lead the Christian into the water and bring him out again. And while they were being baptized, before they would go into the pool, the newly converted, or the Christians, would turn to the west to renounce Satan. And then they would go through the pool that would take them to the east, the land of the rising sun, to welcome the new light. Christ is the new light. Don't we use the Easter candle, the big candle? That's the symbol of the new light. This baptistry, which was once covered in marble, as we can see, the beautiful Byzantine crosses that are all over, as I said earlier, would show us how much this place must have been important to the early Christians.
From the double church of St. Mary, let's now move to another part of Ephesus, to the tomb of St. John the Apostle, and to the basilica erected in his honor by Justinian and his wife Theodora in the 6th century. As you can see by this model, St. John's Basilica was truly impressive, and at that time was the largest in the world. Let's listen to Father Joe as he describes St. John's and the nearby Temple of Artemis.
So here we are at the site of St. John's Basilica, and I would like to point out to you the only column that was reconstructed from the Temple of Artemis, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Temple of Artemis was run by priestesses. The flat land you are looking at once was all water. The ships used to bring pilgrims just to the Temple of Artemis. The staircase of the temple of Artemis led to the water. In fact, it is from this, what today is like a valley, that we can understand the word Ephesus, which is exactly a Greek word, Ephesus. To be honest with you, I mean, the word can have many interpretations, but one plausible interpretation is Ephesus, the mouth. Because if you can see, it's like a mouth, like an open mouth, and it's the mouth to Asia Minor. As we shall be seeing on that plastic model, which is ahead of us, the water, as from archaic period, started to reside during the Byzantine time and the Roman period until it stopped in 551 after the earthquake that destroyed Ephesus, where today is Pamujak. So this is the first Ephesus where we are staying here. I mean, the water, remember, we are staying here, and the water used to reach to this place, just by the temple of Artemis. And it started to reside slowly, slowly. It left the Kaiastros, the river that would now lead to Pamujak, to the Aegean, but it was the Kaiastros also that would help to fill the harbor of Ephesus. We have visited Ephesus. Ephesus is between these two hills. Here it's Mary's house. The walls of Symmachus, that, as I told you, were built 200 years before Christ, so they have more than 2,000 years. And they were, in fact, built on this side to protect the city, the third Ephesus. That's why they brought it between the two hills and protected by this wall from this side of the country, because on the other side, there was the water. I would like you to look at that ruins of a very ancient church, these apes and those three columns on one side and the two columns on the other side, because that's the church where the beloved of the Lord, St. John, was buried for the first time. And then it was the Emperor Justinianus with his wife Theodora, that built this magnificent basilica to him when they were returning back from Jerusalem. So he brought him from that tiny, modest church up to this hill to give him a place of honor that is due to such a great apostle. St. John is very much tied up with Ephesus because it's not only that he himself came here and, as we have already said, brought the Blessed Mother, but here in Ephesus he wrote most of the gospel and his letters, the 3 letters that John wrote to the Christian communities, because he is also the apostle of Asia Minor. The reconstruction of parts of this basilica are really neat because they give us a very clear picture of how huge this place must have been. And the basilica itself is built in a sign of a cross, of the Latin cross. We shall be going through it, and naturally once we are inside, we can see it much more clearly. And also the Basilica of St. John has its own baptistry place. So this would show us how important also this basilica was for the first Christians. Here we are in the main hall of the basilica, and naturally with the Holy of Holies on the other end of the basilica, where in the middle we find underneath, of course, we find the tomb of St. John. The architect that built the Basilica of St. John is the same one that built the cathedral, sort of Santa Sofia, Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. And we find that the same, on the columns you see, on top of the columns, those are the signs of Emperor Justinianus and the Empress Theodora. They are the same signs that we find in Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. So this is the baptistry. we, through baptism, we are also buried in Christ. And naturally, since already in baptism there is resurrection, but not yet, so the first Christians, developing a theology of the resurrection and also of a communion of saints, have always understood that the Christian faith is to be lived fully with the living and the dead. That's why, I mean, as from ancient times, we don't use the word very much dead, but that we rest. In fact, Paul says it, we sleep in Christ. Underneath we find the tomb of St. John, the beloved of the Lord. This place has been visited throughout the early centuries by very many devotees that would go to the Holy Land, and returning back to Europe, they would go through Ephesus, Istanbul, and back home. There is one other thing I would like to tell you about St. John, which was very important, is that this is documented. I mean, after the first century, they wanted to open his tomb to see again John, and as soon as they opened the tomb, there was like a cloud of smoke that left his tomb. And it is said that people around who were sick got all healed. And that's what brought more and more pilgrims to this place. I mean, there were a lot of healings that happened in this basilica.
As we drive up Mount Nightingale, the location of Mary's house, we pass a gigantic statue of Our Lady, which was dedicated on October 13th, 1996. This statue was erected thanks to the generosity of Mr. Joseph Quatman, head of the American Society of Ephesus, which since 1954 has underwritten the restoration of Mary's house, St. John's Basilica, and the double church of St. Mary. Mr. Quatman's father, George, began this work in 1954 after a visit to Ephesus that very year. When he saw the disrepair of the three important shrines, he felt strongly the Blessed Mother was asking him to help restore them. Now that we have arrived at the path leading to Mary's house, we enter what feels to many like another dimension, where time seems to stand still, where one can literally drink in the serenity of the grounds and Mary's house.
Here we are on the Mountain of the Nightingale, Bulbulda in Turkish, and as soon as one arrives here, the first ancient remains that one can see are these ancient remains. They are foundations of a Roman villa, and it seems that in the 4th century they were used for a monastery, an Orthodox monastery that was here. The hole in the middle would be the cistern that was used by the monks to gather the water here. What is important in these ruins are those arches in front of us, because in 1894 they unearthed underneath those arches these elaborated tombs that in Latin we call sarcophagus, with very ancient remains. It was not only those 4 tombs that were found, but plenty of other tombs around here. And this is very important for the story of the House of Mary, because the tombs around holy places were always an indication of a place that was very holy. The first Christians, out of their faith for the communion of saints and the devotion to those saints or the martyrs, they looked for places around the tombs of holy people. And in fact, why would people come up on this mountain, all this way up here, if this place had nothing to say to them, especially with regards to the Blessed Mother?
On the path leading to Mary's house, there are various signs written in many different languages, explaining the shrine to the over 1.5 million people who visit each year.
This is an 1867 statue of our Blessed Mother, Mary. And this used to be in a school in the city of Aydin, not very far away from here. Aydin, ancient Tralles, where there were many Christians until 1922. There was this Christian school, and this was standing there somewhere. And after the nuns left and the school was closed down, they gave it as a gift to Mary's house.
One of the things people never want to leave without is water from the stream that runs through the house. This stream is fed from an underground spring, which is highly unusual high up on Mount Nightingale. People stand for hours to carry home this water. Healings have been reported from its use. Also, people by the thousands have attached their intentions to the walls below Mary's house via small handkerchiefs. Before entering the house, here is a diagram which outlines the original shape, which is actually that of a cruciform or cross, as well as the location of the rooms and altars. As we view the house from inside, let's listen to the description of Mary's house given by the German seer Anne Catherine Emmerich in the early 1800s. It was this description that would eventually lead to the house's rediscovery in 1891.
St. John had a house built for the Blessed Virgin before he brought her to Ephesus. Several Christian families had settled in the same area, escaping the violent persecution in Jerusalem. But Mary's house was the only one built of stone. It was on a hill which sloped steeply towards Ephesus, which could be seen from it as could the Aegean Sea. It was wild, but not desolate, with a stream running through it down towards Ephesus. The front and sides of the stone house were square, while the back was round, with the main section of the house 20 by 40 feet. It was divided by a fireplace in the center, with wicker screens making small cells for Mary's maidservant and visitors in the front portion.
Catherine described Mary's bedroom as follows.
The furthest corner was divided by a curtain and formed Mary's oratory or altar. In the center of the wall existed a tabernacle which could be opened and shut by pulling a string. In it stood a cross shaped like a Y, the shape Catherine always saw, Christ's cross. To the right of the oratory, against a niche in the wall, was Mary's sleeping place. Opposite it, to the left, was a cell where her clothes and other belongings were kept divided by a curtain. Mary would sit in front of this curtain while working or reading. Mary's couch or bed was a box, 1 1/2 feet high and of the length and width of a narrow plank. A covering was fastened to it. The sides were covered with carpets to the floor, decorated with tassels and fringes. A round cushion served as a pillow.
Catherine further described the area of Mary's house as follows.
The dwellings of other families were all scattered about at some distance, like a village of peasants. The Blessed Virgin lived here alone with a younger woman, her maidservant, who fetched what little food was needed. There was no man in the house, but they were sometimes visited by an apostle or disciple on his travels. There was one man whom I saw more often going in and out of the house. I always took him to be John.
The Venerable Anne Catherine Emmerich, a nun from Westphalia, Germany, received the wounds of Christ at age 24. By the year 1812, at age 37, she received the full stigmata and was unable to eat. The stigmata was declared genuine by the Church in 1814. During her last 3 years on earth, 1821 through 1824, Sister Catherine dictated detailed visions she had received on the life of Jesus and Mary to a poet named Brentano. The work is called Life of Christ and contains the exact location and vivid description of Mary's house in Ephesus, which you have just seen. While Brentano's transcriptions were not perfect, his errors were minor as to chronology and geophiologically. They were never found counter to scripture, morals, or faith. To quote Sister Catherine,
After our Lord's ascension, Mary lived for 3 years on Mount Zion, for 3 years in Bethany, and for 9 years in Ephesus, whither St. John had taken her.
There have been many reported miracles at Mary's house. One of the former resident priests, Father Francis Sellen, stated, "Miracles happen quite often. They happen to persons of all faiths and nationalities. You need only see all the discarded crutches and braces and votive offerings as witness to the many cures." The reported apparitions of the Blessed Virgin occurred in 1902 to a caretaker who saw Mary in silence on a cloud for 30 minutes before she ascended the hillside. This reported apparition looked very similar to one reported in Medjugorje. A group of nuns reported a similar experience seeing the Holy Mother at night surrounded by an incomparable light, just as she appeared above the Coptic church in Zaytun, Egypt in 1969. In April 1959, Mrs. Elizabeth Fraser had her own very special encounter with the Blessed Mother at Mary's house. Her daughter Mary Taranelli explains what happened.
It was just Father Deutsch and my mother that came that day. She was really praying really hard for my aunt and their family and the children and suffering, just suffering in general. And she had a strong feeling that of Mary's presence in saying that not to worry so about them, that children who are handicapped are truly blessed. And my mother thought, isn't that wonderful news? She almost couldn't wait to go and tell my aunt how nice it was. And again, she prayed and she looked up at the altar and was praying, and the Blessed Mother appeared again and spoke to her again and said, this life is no more than a wave of the hand and no more than a veil between. And my mother thought, this is so beautiful. And she said, I want to see this closer. And at communion time, she decided that she would, when she went up to communion, she wanted to see this statue. She had statue in the back of her mind. And she wanted to see the statue that she could see from the center of the little house. And when she went up at communion time, the statue was ugly to her. It really took her by surprise. It's black. It's a black statue. The nose is broken off, and there are no hands. And compared to what she had been seeing, it was a shock to her. She said, oh, goodness, she couldn't turn away fast enough. But then after communion, she went back, and she was praying again. And she looked back up, and the Blessed Mother was there again. But it was more of a feeling of statue rather than the Blessed Mother being there. And the Blessed Mother spoke to her again, and it was beautiful. And my mother just felt so much at peace and so at home, I think is probably the best word. But Father Deutsch went on to study it and decided to write this book, Our Lady of Ephesus. And my mother's story was in the last chapter. And the Quatmans read it and said her description of the Blessed Mother was so vivid and so clear. They said that it would be nice to have a painting done so that they could have some holy cards made. And her description in Father Deutsch's book, describing the Blessed Mother, how beautiful she was, and her face and her smile and so forth, that they thought the Blessed Mother may want to have a painting done. So they started. And it took about 2.5 years before the painting was completed. And so I remember the painting and remember her working with Bob Smith was the artist's name. So during those 2 years, 2.5 years, it was a struggle for the both of them, but the picture was finally done. The Quatmans had suggested maybe our national shrine of the Immaculate Mary in Washington, D.C. And, but they don't take gifts that often, you know. They would be inundated if they took everything people wanted to give. And most of the pictures at the National Shrine are mosaics, not paintings. So it would be very unusual. But for some reason, there The director of the National Shrine did accept the painting, and that's where it is today. The original is there.
I was asked to give a presentation through music, give a retreat day in Wildwood, New Jersey, at the Church of the Assumption. And as I look back on that, even the word Assumption in Wildwood takes on significance. So I went out to Cape May to give the presentation, and I stayed in the home of one of the women, and she showed me to my room. And when she showed me to my room, on the bureau was this very unusual picture. And I said to her, "Is that Mary?" And she said, "Yes, it is." She said, "It's Our Lady of Ephesus." And she said, "It's my favorite picture." And I thought, gee, I had never heard of Our Lady of Ephesus. So she said to me, "Why don't you keep the picture?" She said, and I said, "I can't keep the picture. It's your favorite picture, and you must keep your favorite picture." So the next morning I was leaving, and as I was going out to the car, she came chasing after me. She had the picture in a frame, and she said, "Here," she said, you must keep it." She said, "Maybe it will inspire you for a song." And I thought, well, maybe, but didn't really think any more than that. In 1992, I was completing an album, a tape I had recorded called "You Are the Highest Honor of Our People." And it took a lot of time and a lot of effort to finish the tape. And I was so thrilled that the recording was finished, and all I had left was the mixing. So I was praying one evening for the Lord to lead me to a picture or something I could use for the cover, either of Jesus or Mary. And that evening, my eyes fell upon the picture of Our Lady of Ephesus. And I looked over, and I went and I took the picture out of the frame. And as I read the back, it told this story of how biblical scholars feel that Mary spent her final days in Ephesus, accompanied by John. And it went on to tell the story of a woman who in 1959 had a vision in the house of Our Lady. And it started speaking the woman's words. The woman was Elizabeth Fraser. And it started saying her words, that as she looked upon the face of Mary, she was so taken with the beauty of Our Lady that she said, "It is your smile that is most beautiful. No, it's your eyes. No, it's your cheek. No, it's your mouth." And I was reading this, and I was saying to myself, this is a song. And I could just feel the music starting to well up in me. And it was a beautiful melody, and the words went so beautifully with it. So I went over to the piano, and I said, "Lord, if I could do it quickly, it will be part of this project, but it has to come fast." So within 2 hours, the song was completed. And there was just enough room on the master tape for one more song. So we were able to get "It Is Your Smile That Is Most Beautiful" on the master tape. It was the last song we completed. About 5 months later, I received a letter from Vermont. And it was from Mary Taranelli, the daughter of the woman who had this vision. And in the letter, she said to me that her mother would have been thrilled to know that her words were put to music, that her mother died in 1990, and she would have been thrilled that these words were put to music. She said, "My husband, Don, said to me that anyone who writes this kind of music about Our Lady must see her house in Ephesus." She said, "We're going on a pilgrimage in July, and we feel that we would like you to come with us." I met them for the first time at Newark Airport. I had never met these people in my life. We were 10 people, 2 of whom were priests who came on the journey. And it was just such an incredible experience as one walks in mystery. We arrived at the House of Our Lady in Ephesus on July 16th, the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And we arrived and walked up this beautiful path. The air of expectancy was just welling up in us. There was such a serenity and a peace that was just indescribable. And a hush fell over our whole group. We knew we were entering a place of mystery, a place of truth, that Our Lady was present here and had a wonderful gift waiting for us. Then the day before we left, Father was sitting with me over in front of the house, and he said, "Now tell me, how did this song come about?" And I proceeded to tell him about the woman in Cape May. And he said, "Well, you know, you cannot leave Ephesus without singing this song right in the house of Our Lady." And I said, "Father, I've been waiting for that all week." It is your smile
is most beautiful. It is your smile that is most beautiful. No, it's your eyes that are most beautiful. It is your eyes that are most beautiful. So this is how love and happiness look. So this is how it's all in your eyes. No, it's your cheek that is most beautiful. No, it's your mouth that is most beautiful. Eyes round and full, all creation is seen in them. It is your smile that is most beautiful. I simply could not take my eyes from her face. I simply could not take my eyes from her face.
The tradition of Mary's house in Ephesus dates to the 1st century, to a community of Christians who lived in a place called Shirinje, a day's walk from Mary's house. Let's listen to Father Joe as he explains this 1900-year tradition of travel to Mary's house to celebrate her Dormition, or sleep, every August 15th, the feast we call the Assumption. Here is what the little village looks like today. Shirinje is the oldest tradition known in support of Our Lady's last years and Assumption into heaven from Ephesus.
Way before Anne Catherine Emmerich would have seen the house of the Blessed Mother in her revelations, we find a group of Christians that was living in this village, which today is called Shirinje, and we are visiting it, because this village until 1922 was a Christian village, exactly. Greek Orthodox community used to live in this village. And this is another proof that we have that Mary lived and died on the mountain of the Nightingale, Bulbul Dam. Because these Christians testify that throughout the centuries, they have always went to Mary's house on August 15th to celebrate the feast of the Dormition of the Blessed Mother. And this is a testimony that they have left us even in writing signed. The descendants of these Christians live today in Greece, and they live in a village called Ephesus in the mountains. This place is very important from the Christian point of view, and the importance is also shown in its name. The ancient name of Shirinje would be Kirkinje, and Kirk in Turkish means 40. This is because of the 40 monasteries that were in this area. The fact that this village had 2 churches, we are standing by the biggest church of this village dedicated to St. John the Baptist would already tell us something more about our Christian faith. A visit to Mary's house without a visit to Sherinja is an incomplete visit. And we're reading the story of Mary's house and its discovery, we cannot not refer to the people of Sherinja, because they were the ones to inform us about their tradition. And as we know, traditions don't spring out from nowhere, that in their community, from ages past, they've always visited on August 15th, Mary's house. The Christians that once lived here have always claimed to have been the remnant of the first Christians in Ephesus. So the tradition that Mary lived and died in Ephesus is also sustained by the witness of love of the villagers of Sherinja today.
Now let's move closer to Mary's house and further examine its rediscovery.
Explaining the position of the house of Mary, Catherine Emmerich would tell us that the house has the mountain at its back, the mountain that you see behind me, from on which you can see Ephesus, and with the sea in front and its many islands. The Lazarus priest came through that way that we see between the two trees. That way leads to the so-called tobacco fields where they met with the woman. And we shall be going there. In her explanation also about the whereabouts of the house of Mary, Anne Catherine Emmerich would tell us that on top of a hill nearby, there is a tower or a castle that later on was turned into a bishop's place. And this is the tower that we see that still exists. Archaeologists would date the stones of this tower earlier than the ruins of Ephesus that we have today. The road behind me would be the road the Lazarus priest came through when they were looking for Mary's house. And on my left, there is the field called the woman's field, because they met with some women and they asked them for water. And the woman said, we won't even have enough for ourselves. It's better if you go to the monastery, because there is a spring that runs behind this monastery. And that's what took them to Mary's house. And to their great surprise, they found what they called 4 walls without a roof.
People from all over the world arrive at very similar conclusions regarding Mary's house. Father Tarsi, one of the Franciscan caretakers of Mary's house, explains why.
My impression of this place is something very marvelous. People from all over the world come here, and when I say all over the world, I want to make a little distinction, except from the third world countries. The rest of the world comes here every day, so I meet people from all over the world, except my own poor people. I do see some Indians and some people from third world countries, but they are all immigrants who are settled down in the Western world. What is my impression here? One important thing I feel is people enter as very curious, but come out very peaceful, very serene, very calm, in a prayerful mood. I think that's a great proof that this house has got something special present, the presence of Mary. And when we say present, it's not only the physical presence, that is the spiritual presence. Persons filled with the Spirit leave their presence, and one feels that presence. A Spirit-filled person lives his presence even though physically that person may not be there. I am firmly convinced that Mary is present now in this place. From the way people experience her while they are inside the house, one can only wonder the curiosity, the talking that they do while they enter, and the silence which they have when they come out. Silence is a great reality. Coming from India, it speaks to me a lot. Having silence means you have experienced something deep within you. When one doesn't experience some depth, one chatters, one talks. When one experiences something deep, he goes into silence. Another important thing that I feel is that Muslim brothers and sisters come here to pray and pray with much devotion. And I feel in the mother's heart there's always place for everyone. Getting these two religions together here is a great sign. Perhaps this is the only place in the world where these two strong communities are meeting together in union, in love, and in prayer. Absolutely, there is no antagonism one towards the other. They are happy to see Mary's house and pray in Mary's house. I feel this house is an icon of unity, perhaps a more devotion, more love, more prayer to Mary would make us more human, understanding, more loving, more sympathetic. I was greatly touched by the song which one of your friends sang the other evening. And she told how Mary welcomes everyone, good, bad, sinner, old, young, well-dressed, badly dressed, everyone. Mary welcomes everyone. And the Christian asks Mary, when will these people become Christians? And Mary says, that is not your problem. That is not your question. That is my responsibility. You have to do what I did to them. Love them, be with them, walk with them, speak to them. You have to do only that. All the rest is not your responsibility. I take care of that.
A pilgrim from Vermont on her third visit to Mary's house expresses her feelings in a similar way.
I've been here, let's see, 3 times. The first time I came, I didn't really know what to expect. When I came here, the first thing I noticed is just the peacefulness of it. And it kind of reminds me of where I live in Vermont with the mountains and the hills and just the beauty of the place, the natural beauty of it. You can't really help but not think of God and the wonder of the world just being here and looking out at the mountains and the hills. So that definitely comes through, and that's probably one of the biggest impressions in the beginning. It's also a spiritual place for me where I came to pray for family and for friends. So it made me feel a lot closer to Mary being here and to her son Jesus. The other thing that is probably the deepest thing I feel here is that not only Catholics come here, but Muslims come here, and it's just amazing. With all the fighting and disagreement between the countries and between the religions, that this is some place that everyone comes to be close to Mary. And I think that is like a common thread between all the different cultures and all the different religions. And it kind of gives me a feeling that maybe someday there will be peace in the world through Mary because of this common thread that we all feel something here. It might not be exactly the same thing, but there's definitely a peacefulness and a closeness to something we feel deep in our souls.
Two more pilgrims from far-off Japan and South Africa also react in a positive way.
I like this place very much because this place is very sergeant and very peaceful and very quiet places.
We traveled to Istanbul and then to Izmir. We'd read about the house and we're looking forward to seeing it. And when we arrived here, what struck us was the sense of peace and tranquility, the environs and certainly in the house. And what was interesting was the way it's been preserved and respected in a predominantly Muslim country, and the references to the Virgin Mary from the Quran were also interesting for us. And we hope that many other people will get to see what we've seen. Thank you.
People seem to feel a very strong connection to the Blessed Mother after visiting her home. Here are 3 women who felt very comforted by Our Lady.
I have come here on a pilgrimage. All week we've been on holiday in Kushadasi, and I felt very worldly and very removed from anything spiritual. And just when we arrived here, everything changed. I felt this is not a holiday, it's a pilgrimage. The difference was very clear. Towards the activities that we've been partaking of during the week, it seemed totally different. It was like entering a different world when I walked into Mary's house.
Just an unbelievable wonder on how people accomplish something so dramatic in Ephesus. And coming into Mary's house, I found a very warm, tranquil, peaceful feeling. When I walked out, I was shaking. I'm just very comforted. And like you say, it's somebody's watching over me. And it's a nice warm feeling.
It does. It helps put everything in perspective, just to come and actually be here and see the things that existed, you know, things that you hear about but you never really put down in concrete, and it's amazing to be able to see it. And it's really here, and going through the house was just really soothing, I thought. It was just going through, and it was really quiet and dark, and you feel kind of just quiet and comforted.
Sorry, the first thing I noticed was the statue of Our Lady, which is the replica of the miraculous medal. And I thought, why do they not have the crucifix behind the altar? Normally you notice a crucifix when you walk into a church. And immediately it came to me, the words of St. John, Mother, behold thy son, son, behold thy mother. And the presence of Mary as Mother of the Church became very significant. And then I noticed the small crucifix on the altar. And again, it became clear that Mary leads you to Jesus.
Despite the fact that the dominant religion in Turkey is Muslim, Muslims also feel a strong bond with Holy Mother Mary, who they hold in high esteem along with Jesus. The Blessed Mother is referred to many times very positively in the Quran, the Muslim holy book. Here are some Turkish visitors to Mary's house who explain further why they feel just as comfortable and welcome at Mary's house as Christians.
Enerji veren kutsal yerlerden biri de burası.
One of the holy centers that gives great amount of energy is this place here.
Biz buraya arkadaşlarla geldiğimiz zaman
when we come here with our friends,
burada zikir yapıyoruz.
We do zikr here, the remembrance of the names of God.
Ve Hazreti Meryem'in kutsallığını takdis ediyoruz.
And we verify for ourselves, we bring testimony to the holiness of Mary.
I'm from Turkey. I'm coming from Antalya. It's the first time I visit St. Mary's Church, and it's my father and my mother, Leila. I feel that this house is everybody's house. In our book, in our Quran, there is a pray about Miriam, so that I think that everybody's house, this is everybody's house, and everybody should feel in this way. You know, we are Muslims and we believe in Muhammad, but we think that Isa is the first, and also in our book it's written that Isa and Maryam, it's all written, so we believe all, and we are happy to be here and to pray.
People come to Mary's house on pilgrimage as a tour stop, out of curiosity for many reasons. Here we listen to a man from Wales and a family from Ireland.
This is a very special place, and Mary wants us to come here to have a renewal of the spirit, and as a retreat from away from the harshness and hardness of our lives and the world.
We've had a wonderful experience. The people have just been lovely. And I get emotional here at Mary's house because it's so beautiful. It's got me, and particularly the song, because we lost a little girl, and that song meant something to me, listening to her singing. So I went up and I asked her, would she give me the words? And she gave me a present of the tape, but really, I thought it was beautiful.
Many people have talked about the peace and serenity at Mary's house, its calming impact, the feeling that nothing else seems important when you're there. It's as if Holy Mother is saying,
Children, come to me that I might soothe you, that I might love you, that I might comfort you.
Sister Antonia and Sister Denise are two sisters who have been caretakers at Mary's house for over 3 years. Here is what they have to say.
The first thing that I'd say about Mary's house is a place of grace. Many times Mary can touch people here in a way that she can't, that in another place would be different. Somebody who's been away from the church, who's had a bad experience, can come in here, and for a minute you have a minute to pray, you have a minute to think about your life in peace.
We feel, as many people feel, that it's a special place of grace. She wanted to be hidden here, but very, very prayerful. Many people have had graces here, above all in their hearts. Sometimes we know, as in Lourdes, that there are conversions to Mary, but also physical healing happened.
It's not just adults who come to visit Mary's house, but thousands of children as well. And perhaps to children above all, does the Blessed Mother give the biggest welcome and the most love and all of her joy.
Hail Mary, hail, hail Mary, hail, hail Mary, hail, hail Mary, hail, hail full of grace, the Lord is with you. Hail Mary, hail, hail Mary, blessed are you among all women. Hail Mary, hail, hail Mary, hail, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, hail, hail Mary, hail, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Спасибо, Дева Мария. Thanks, Virgin Mary, for everything you do for us. We will pray.
The hill immediately behind Mary's house is of great importance, and Catherine Emmerich described this area as follows.
Behind the house, a little distance up the hill, the Blessed Virgin had laid out a way of the cross. She paced out and measured all the distances of the path of Calvary, as she never failed to contemplate our Lord's death and his sufferings.
The first station is just right where we stand. And the stones of these stations were discovered in 1895 during the first excavations of this whole place. So that's how we are going to move. We cannot go throughout all the stations, these 12 stations, because the stations, as I said, start from here and they go straight to the bush. So, and then it would go around and around. So we might be visiting like the 5th station and the 7th station. That would bring us also very close to a place that would be 100 meters behind the house.
Every day, she climbed partway up the hill to carry out this devotion. she marked each station with a stone or marked a tree if there was one there. The way led into a wood, and upon a hill in this wood she had marked the place of Calvary and the grave of Christ in a little cave within another hill. She and her maidservant meditated on each station, renewing the mystery of its significance in their hearts.
Here we are standing on the 7th station of the Way of the Cross that the Blessed Mother built for her meditation behind her house. And Catherine Emmerich would explain to us that what they did like a circle, so that two people, she would say, two people could go around. Huh? And that gives us an idea how she would have been meditating, even going around this circle and meditating on the passion of her son Jesus.
Later, the Blessed Virgin arranged the stations better, and I saw her inscribing the meaning of each station on the stones, number of paces, etc. She also cleaned out the cove of the Holy Sepulchre and made it a place of prayer. After the Blessed Virgin's death, I saw this Way of the Cross being visited by Christians who threw themselves down and kissed the ground.
Catherine Emmerich would tell us the last days of the Blessed Mother here on earth. By the time she got sick because of old age, and how the apostles were called, and how they have washed her body and prepared her for burial. And she would tell us that they buried her 100 meters behind her house. And here we stand 100 meters behind the house of the Blessed Mother. In this area, there are 3 caves, and she was laid in one of these caves. And what we see there is the top of this cave where she must have been laid. And so here we pray the 4th glorious mystery, the Assumption into heaven in body and soul of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Do not be frightened. You're his chosen one.
This is exactly 100 meters behind her house. According to even, this was done with studies, eh? Right. The Belgian, we have a dossier in our library. This is the whole place here. This is the whole place. If she had to live here her last days, according to what Anne Catherine Emmerich would tell us, she must have died here too. So she must have been buried somewhere here. And Catherine Emmerich would assure us that when the time comes, her tomb would be revealed.
Not surprisingly, another person who stood beneath the cross would also accompany John and Mary to Ephesus, Mary Magdalene. Her tomb was rediscovered in 1952 at the entrance to the Cave of the 7 Sleepers by the renowned archaeologist Louis Massignon. The Magdalene remains are now in France. Let's rejoin Father Joe for some final words on both the history of Mary's house and reasons why all the popes of the 20th century have supported it as Mary's final resting place and approved it as worthy of pilgrimage.
When in 1891, His Holiness Pope Leo XIII was informed about the rediscovery of this place, he immediately transferred all the privileges from Jerusalem to Ephesus. And the popes that followed him all had positive remarks to do about this place. Even Pope John XXIII, when he was a nuncio for Turkey and Greece, he came down here. And then in '67, Pope Paul VI came in person and prayed in this chapel. And in '79, His Holiness Pope John Paul II came here and celebrated Mass here. And in 1991, for the first 100 years since the discovery of this place, the Pope sent us a message. And in this message, he says one important word for me. He calls this place the material house of Mary. The uniqueness of this place is because she lives here. When people come here and they feel touched, going in by the poverty and the simplicity of this place, some come out and would tell us, in this place there is something. In this place there is nothing. Here there is someone, and the someone is she herself. And people who come here and feel that they've been touched is because they've been touched by her love. This is what makes this place special in the first place. Then it's because this is one of the few corners in the world where two great religions, such as Christianity and Islam, can meet together in prayer.
In addition to the peace, serenity, comfort, and holiness of Mary's house, people repeatedly mention the sense of unity they feel with others who visit, regardless of background or religion. There is a strong sense that Mary's house will play an important unifying role in the future as the Blessed Mother continues to invite and welcome everyone to her home. Only in heaven may one find greater peace.
And her name was Mary, and she whispered yes. Standing on a hilltop, looking toward the sky, raised her heart and sang her own glad cry. My soul shouts your greatness, your eyes cast on me. Your name still is holy, your mercy will see. And her name was Mary, and she whispered yes. And she whispered yes. Mary, my mother, my trust, I dedicate and consecrate myself to you. Give me your heart, that I may love your Son and your church with my whole heart, my whole mind, my strength, and my soul. Mary, my mother, my trust,